here, but I think in the interest of time, we will get things started here. I'll keep an eye on letting folks in the door here. So anyway, listen, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first SDNA member meetup. And I say first because we're hoping that we can do more of these and make it a sort of a monthly get together. So think of it like, you know, kind of just get together for a cup of coffee or a cool beverage once a month just to catch up and also maybe get a few tips and ideas on different topics. So talking with Christy, our president, and said, you know, this would be a great idea to connect and leverage technology and just a chance to share ideas and in a very busy world that we're all in and connect, because we just find that obviously that's so important to do, and it's just we don't have a chance to do that, and trying to get together in person all the time is not easy to do, and certainly understand that. So anyway, welcome. Thank you for participating in this. I'm glad you're here, and look forward to today's presentation, as well as look for more interesting topics to come down the road. And if you got ideas for topics for these kind of get-togethers, please share those with us, with myself or with Christy or anyone. Just please do that, because we will look to make this engaging and fun and hopefully informational and helpful for everyone. So with that, couple housekeeping tips here as we get going. Be sure to keep yourself on mute if you can throughout the presentation. I'll watch it on this end. I can mute all, but if you can kind of mute yourself along the way, that's great. If you've got questions or comments, you can put them in the chat, but I also know that Jim at the end of the thing will open it up for some questions, comments, so we can have, you know, Q&A that way if you're not comfortable typing it in the chat as well. So don't worry about that. We are recording this session, so we'll make a recording of Jim's presentation available as well afterwards. With that, I think we will get started. I'm going to make sure we get as much time for Jim here. We're trying to keep these to about 30-45 minutes, not a lengthy presentation, because we know we're all busy. But with that, I'm going to welcome everyone, and especially Jim Helland, who's our presenter today. Jim is, as many of you know, is an instructor at the journalism department at SDSU, with a long and impressive tenure in newspapers in South Dakota and far beyond as well. And he's been at SDSU now for quite some time and teaches the various classes and courses up there, as well as works with the students who manage and run the collegiate independent newspaper as well. Works with them and advises him on things, so he keeps very, very busy. But one of Jim's fortes is design and what makes newspapers look good, and particularly, you know, understanding, you know, all the constraints and pressures that you live within, and how you can, you know, help make your newspaper look a little bit better if you're looking to do that. So with that, I'm going to just pivot to Jim and let him take it from there, and we'll get off and running. So welcome. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Dave. Can I share my screen here? Or
go ahead and try. Let me see if that's working for you. All right, I think.
Okay, perfect. All right, you everybody see that? Quick tips. You see that, Dave?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Okay, let's do this. Boom. All right. So thanks for coming, everybody. It's great to see all of you here. I think, Dave, this is about the third time I've done one of these design things in the last 6 or 7 years, and they're all somewhat similar. Today's theme here is quick tips. And as Dave said, we're going to try to do about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever. But I think these are 5 strategies that you can use this next week. When I talk to professionals in the business, especially like at SDNA meetings, usually people fall into two camps when it comes to design. People who think it's fun and they like it, and it's kind of a easier than doing the stories and all that kind of stuff. And then people who see it as a necessary evil, and they might not like it at all just because they're not comfortable with it. So I'm hoping that just a few tips here will make things a little bit easier for you. Before we start, so I don't forget, many of you know about this book. If you don't, it costs about $50. I think I jumped on online today, and there was some at Amazon for like as low as $43. If you don't have this book and you want to get better at design, I definitely urge you to get this book by Tim Harrower and Julie Ellman. Harrower has been a great designer for a very long time, and there's some good stuff in there. I did want to show you this too, and you can see the URL down there at the bottom. I was in Minneapolis late last week at a conference with advisors and students who put together student newspapers at the Associated Collegiate Press meeting, and I happened upon they mentioned this page right here, and that's, if you go to that URL, you'll get these downloadable PDFs where there's a bunch of good stuff there, interviewing tips. You've got terrible leads, right? Just all sorts of different things here, how to report on meetings. And then down here, Ron Johnson's design checklist and Ron Johnson's typography. So this, you'll find this, it's one quick page. It's got a lot of really good stuff. And so I would say this, over the last 20 or 30 years, Harrower and Johnson are two people that I've seen at different workshops that I really like their work. I think they're really good teachers. So I do a lot of stuff, or I will tell you to do a lot of stuff design-wise, because these guys have told me over the years to do it. And I think they have a lot of good points. So I like to always start with this, right? What you, as a designer, what's your job? What are you supposed to be doing? And of course, you always want to remember that first thing. You want to make your newspaper page look attractive. You want people to walk in that convenience store, see it laying there, and it grabs them. For whatever reason, they have to just pick it up and look at it because your design is so interesting. So that's the first thing. You got to have some stopping power. The second thing is, once you get them to invest some time in you, you have to help them. You have to help those readers by arranging all of your news in, as it says there, an organized fashion that makes it really easy for people to navigate, really easy for people to read, because reading is work. And if you make them do extra work, the chances are they're going to go somewhere else, do something. They're going to go to the web, or they're going to watch TV news or whatever. So we want you and your pages to be clear, concise, and organized. So with that in mind, I took a look at I went down to Dave's office and took a look at some weekly papers from late June. And those newspapers are going to help me get through what are 5 quick tips to help you make your newspapers look better. So here we go. Number 1, and most important, is use a dominant visual. It doesn't, it's usually going to be a photograph, right? Because journalists take people places, whether it be Main Street construction or a farmer's ranch or whatever. All these types of different things. So it's going to be a photo most of the time, but it can be a graphic sometimes. It could be some sort of combination between text and graphic, or text and photo, whatever it is, whatever you're using, I urge you to make it big, right? Dominant image, the dominant visual directs people's attention. It gives people a starting place, and it helps to establish some order.
Thank you.
So don't forget that. And it could be, it could be anything. It could be an artist rendering even. So just make sure you're making that, whatever it is, your dominant image, make it big. And usually, most of the time, toward the top of the page. I think that's really important. Once it starts getting down to the bottom of the page, I think you're kind of defeating the purpose of it. So as high up as possible, it doesn't have to be at the top, but but at least get it on the fold area, that kind of thing. And I would say this, well, I'll mention that in just a second, but this is an example, right? So here's the Nation Center News, and their main visual is big, it's dominant. The rule is usually twice as big as any other photo on the page. And so here we have a nice little, looks like Dave, that's a tabloid, I think, right? So, they do it right here. They make their picture dominant. And I would say this, there's a lot of people in that photo. There's a lot of mug shots, essentially. So you want to make that big so readers can actually see who these people are. So here we have a good example of a dominant image. Here we have another one, right? And this is where I was going to say, if, told people that when I was designing the Argus Leader, my best friend was our photographers. We had great photographers, and their photography really helps drive great design. So here's Jeremy, he's a great photographer. And I would tell you, if you're your own photographer and you feel like you could be better, I would urge you to, sometimes I know Jeremy does these kinds of sessions, get better at being a photographer if you feel like you need to, because it's going to help your design a lot better, be a lot better. So here's the Courier, and they're doing it right here, right? This is a good, big, dominant photo, way bigger than the secondary image. And this is exactly how you establish an order on a page. Bam, everybody's going to start right at the center there with that big headline playing along with that big photo. And that is a good thing. And it just helps readers, makes it easier for them to read. So there's the Courier. Here is the Helland County Republican, and they are not messing around, right? I like this. This is my kind of design, right? They got a nice photo. People are going to love that photo because people love, don't they love kids and kittens and dogs? And here's, you have some event going on in your community at Vacation Bible School. And I think that page is going to have stopping power. Why? It's not a hard thing. Just make a great photo big and look at what you get, an engaging cover. So here is another place where where they did a great job, right? Sometimes this is a collegian. And sometimes I tell them, oh, hey, that's so good. You should just make it the whole front page, right? Put a headline on there and refer them inside. And we found that, and we knew this was going to be huge because everybody wants to know what's going on with Frost Arena. Notice they're spending a whole lot of money. So the editors took a artist rendering. Here's what the place is going to look like. And we kind of monitor how we do. And these flew off the racks. People wanted to see those. We didn't have a whole lot of this paper left the week later because it grabbed people. So here, like, again, you have, these are all tabloids, whoops, and great job, right? Good stuff. Here we have a broadsheet, and I think this is good. There's a lot of good stuff on this page, but the one thing that I would do a little bit different here is I like the guy on the tractor and his story. I would work to move that up on the page. Maybe put it right up here where safety is important, and then take these two, safety is important and asphalt work, and tuck them under the photo. Now, my guess is the designer didn't want to bump these photos. And that's a rule too, but sometimes you got to break certain rules. So I would have got that up above the fold. Otherwise, I think this is really good. I like the photos, good content, just one quick hit, little tweak, and I think that would have worked a little bit better. Here's a page where if you look at the news here, there's a lot of good stuff here. There's a lot of good news, there's photos, but I would work really hard. I would have taken one of these photos, whether it be the airplane in the sky here or this person sitting here with whatever that is. I'm not sure what that is. I would have made a judgment call, and I would have made that a lot bigger. And I made a dominant photo. And there's a lot of stuff on this page. Making whichever photo you pick bigger, probably going to make you kick one of those stories off the cover and put it inside. But I would make that sacrifice. And, it's just a good story on the inside is just going to make your inside pages better.
Recording link out.
I would most definitely, to make this page more effective, I would make one of those images way bigger. Maybe this airplane photo, 3 columns, maybe this photo, if you decide it's good enough, 4 columns, but get that up to dominant image level. Here is a front page where we just, you're asking the readers a lot there, in terms of grabbing them with design. I don't think typography, unless it's a really big, cool headline, pulls readers in. If they walk into the convenience store and see that sitting there, I'm not sure that they're going to get too excited about that. So that photo needs to be way bigger. And I would say there needs to be some more stuff on that page, more visuals on that page, whether it's another photo or, as we'll speak about this later, breakouts. This design just kind of sits there, doesn't grab me, doesn't pull me in at all. And again, one of the biggest problems is we don't have a dominant image. So I would make that bigger. Here is another example. I think what we have here is too much of a good thing. I know people love photos, and I do too, but I think there's 8 photos on this page. I would say there's good content on this page. So the Pioneer Review does a really good job with the content. I would tweak the design a little bit. I think this overwhelms readers. So what I would do is I kind of take a look and decide what's the best stuff I got. It looks like this reading program. I believe there are 4 photos here with this reading program. So I would probably pick 2, and you can say, for more photos, look inside. They actually do it right down here. And go ahead and put those pictures inside. There's nothing wrong with that. Some other possibilities here. Here we have a new CEO. You could probably cut a mug out of that. I don't know if I get it. We're trying to show the work setting here, but I don't think you'd lose a whole lot if you just cut a mug out of this and just mugged that person. Same way with the Teachers of the Year. Those could be mugs. That way you're not, that would eliminate 2 photos essentially, because, they're mug shots now. And then the other thing that I would consider is, could you put another story inside? I don't know. I don't know the story behind all these stories, but the point being, as an editor, you got to make some tough decisions sometimes. And that's true for when you're doing design. And so the upshot of this page is, I just think it overwhelms readers with too much good stuff. I would cut out a few photos, maybe a story, and then look to make these photos maybe even bigger, maybe even a column bigger. I know that's big, but that's what grabs people. All right. And then last, I just wanted to show you this. This is left over from last year at the SDNA conference when I talked. Another problem that I see is our big giant group photos. I didn't count how many people are in here, but there's a lot of them. And the Fulton County Record handles this exactly how it should be done. They make it the whole width of the page. There's a lot of people in there. They make it a big photo. You can see these kids. You can identify them. One of the big problems that I see, every once in a while, is somebody will take a photo like this and make it 3 columns. I've even seen photos like this run 2 columns. And at that point, you really can't, there's just this jumble of tiny little heads, and you really can't see who's who there, right? So it's almost kind of a waste of a space once you make it that small. So if you've got these great group photos and people love to see their kids in the paper, do just what the Fulton County Record did here, and that is make it big. All right, that's number 1. Make a dominant, make sure you have a dominant image, right? So let's go number 2. I think it's really important for you to have a headline hierarchy. This helps readers a lot because it tells them you make a judgment call. You put the biggest headline on what you think is your best story. And then you put the next biggest headline on what you think is your next biggest, best story, right? So headlines should descend in point size from top to bottom. And sometimes when I say that, people will want a formula. Well, what does, give me a formula. What does that look like? And I think it varies from publication to publication. So I'll show you what we did at the Argus, especially years ago when we had 5 stories on the front page. And then it dwindled down. It says the web got smaller and smaller, dwindled down to 4, and sometimes there's 3 stories on the page. But at the Argus, when we first started out, we would want our main headline to be 66 points or bigger. If it was a big news day, it'd be even bigger. And then notice how we go down in point size as the stories descend on the page. So the second best story, somewhere around 48 points. I mean, it didn't have to be exact, but that was about where we wanted to go, all the way down to usually down in the lower right or lower left-hand corner, our number 5 story, we'd have maybe a 24-point headline on it. So we help the readers by telling them, here's our best story, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And having that main dominant image and then having a headline hierarchy to go with it really gives the page order. And like I said, makes it just lots easier to navigate. Couple other things, your biggest headline doesn't have to be that strip headline. It doesn't have to be at the very top of the page, but it should be above the fold, I think. And I see once in a while, I will see way along the bottom, 5 or 6 column headline that's the biggest headline. And I would definitely urge you to get those bigger headlines up higher on the page. Just looks better. When you got that down there at the bottom, it almost looks like it's out of balance. You know, it just doesn't look like it belongs down there. And the reason is because it doesn't. It belongs higher up on the page. So here is the Minnehaha Messenger, and I think they've got a pretty nice hierarchy going here. Notice how you have the big dominant head. It's the biggest head. It's the heaviest head in terms of typography. Local clubs, club helps bring patriotism to community. If I'm a reader, I know right away, they're telling me, hey, this local club story, this is our best story we got right here. Next, as we go down the page, Magic Kingdom, not quite as bold, not quite as big, tells me number 2 story. And then on down the page, we go to West Central offers school supply program and then the picnic story. And notice how using typography, the Minnehaha Messenger tells people start here, go here second, third, and fourth. And I think that's pretty effective. So good job here. Alcester working it too, right? Local fire departments. That headline is big, it's bold, it's at the top, toward the top of the page. And there can be no doubt what Alcester wants you to read first. And that's, boom, the fire story about the fire departments. Next, we've got Sundstrom sworn in. And down here, we have more of a light face or light face type where we've got the radio flyers. And in so doing, the Alcester editors help guide readers through this page using their using typography and a headline hierarchy. Here's Southern County Union Leader. I would urge the editor to work to find, again, 1, 2, 3, 4 stories. 4 stories and a standalone, a couple of photos, whatever it is there. But all the headlines are about the same size. Even the one down low on the page, probably about as big as the Peace Corps headline up here at the top. There are different font typography here, and that's okay. But I would just, again, think about what's my best story. Make sure you tell readers or signal that to readers by making it have the biggest headline. So that would, you probably have to do a little bit of reshuffling with this page because we all know how hard 1 column headlines are to write. But I would urge that editor to think headline hierarchy. And I think you're going to have a better page. Let me back up. I'm glad, good job on the photo here, right? So we're halfway home to making this easier to read because we have a dominant photo. But again, I would go for making one of the headlines big too. Same thing here. A lot of very similar size headlines. I think this is probably it's the boldest and it's got 3 decks, so people will start there. But I would make it even bigger, and I would give these guys, these other headlines, I would also put a hierarchy to them too. Hopefully that makes sense, right? Any questions? Okay. All right. Number 3, keep your typography consistent. I found this out on the, like we all do out on the web one day, probably Twitter, and I just laughed and said, yes, very much so, right? We all have tons and tons of fonts, but you don't want to use, you don't want to use them all, right? Some of them are fine for advertising and all that kind of good stuff, but when it comes to your newspaper pages, you want consistency. And I always say when Thomas Ritchie and I redesigned the Argus, it's been a long time ago, probably 20 some years ago, whatever it was, we picked two type families. Century Old Style was our serif type, and Franklin Gothic was our sans serif. And that's all we used. And, there are different iterations. There's Franklin Gothic Heavy and Franklin Gothic Bold and Demi, and we used those, and Light. And so we use those, but two type families. And that, again, that brings order and consistency to your page. And so you have to figure out what you're going to do with your fonts, but the fewer probably the better, right? Limited number of typefaces provide that consistent look. A lift out quote or a breakout on one page should look the same as on another page. Your section headers, like local news, obituaries, sports, they should all be the same. Your standing heads, like, I don't know, school lunches, gardening, letters to the editor, whatever, all of those should be the same. So when we're flipping pages, we know we're still in whatever paper, the Freeman Courier or whatever, right? When we start using all sorts of different kinds of typefaces, it's almost like some pages don't belong in this paper, right? So I wanted to show you this. Right at the top, we've got kind of this weekly roundup. We have one bit of typography here. We come down, letters to the editor. We have a box with baby caps, letter to the editor. Another standing head, Veblen, Town and Country. So we have three different kind of standing heads here. And I would urge this editor to figure out one standing head. It continues on this page. Here we have a reverse Rossholt school calendar. Then we have the school lunch menus are a little bit different. This side of 60 is different from the weekly roundup. Again, we look at letters to the editor, baby caps, where here we have downsized, and so all sorts of different stuff going on here. And then we have garden corner with, a heavy rule and a lighter rule inside with different font than maybe the Veblen here. So we got a lot of stuff going on here for these standing heads. And I would urge this editor to make them standard. Figure out one good standing head, what that looks like, and then use them everywhere. And you're going to develop a consistency. Your paper is going to look consistent from page to page to page. And that helps people navigate your paper. So what does that look like? So let's take a look here. And I'm going to use Hamlin County Republican here. The typography here is beautiful. I love I really like the flag and the copy, the body copy is great. Notice how the body copy is serif, where this breakout, the Hamlin County, well, whatever this is, it's sans serif, so that's nice. Good, but take a look at their insides. Notice what we have up here, local news. It's got Hamlin County Publishing. By the way, it's beautiful typography. You've got a contrast here with the bold and the light face text. Here's how we're doing our page. And here we have a section head that looks great. Look at the next page. The obituaries, the same typography. And the same kind of, it's not all the way across the page because they don't have a full page of obituaries, but it's the same typography as local news. Everything's the same in terms of the date and the page numbers, and that looks great. The headlines for the obituaries are all the same. And here we have consistency. We jump over to the opinion page. Same, what do we get? Same thing. Same good looking section head. Notice the column signatures, the column sigs here. John's column sig, the last window, is the exact same thing as Jenna's journal. And that looks really good. And that brings some good consistency. And by the way, those are, in my opinion, those are outstanding column sigs. They look great. I wish I would have done them actually. But anyway, so see, we've got that consistency. I wanted to show you this. This is similar. Notice we've got the Courier here in Freeman, and they've got a rail on the outside. So what do you need to know? Here's our index. And by the way, here's how you buy the thing. But notice you jump inside, they have a rail here too. So they keep this theme going, and mark your calendars. And so that's awesome that they've got a really easy, a really, I guess, convenient place for people to go and see what's going on in town. Notice this section head, right? We've got locals, and we've got the, we've got look at what's happening in town. So we have this kind of gray bar with some black type inside of it. We jump over to top stories, and we've got the same treatment. We've got this top stories of the week. We've got Jeremy Boomtown, we have another rail here. So it's very consistent, and we just keep going and we see the same thing. Another rail, and then the forum voices, the voices of people, all the same kind of typography. And this tells us, brings an order and consistency to this newspaper, that it just feels the same everywhere. And that's, again, that's good. That's consistency that helps readers navigate the paper. So graphics, charts should have the same consistent typography, the same color schemes. Gutters should be consistent. And when we're talking about gutters, I wouldn't hesitate to especially between different elements here. So Freeman Golf Course, a healthy symbol. There's a decent amount of white space here. It looks like maybe a pike and a half between the dealing and development. Go ahead and let your paper breathe. Give some space between items, especially like in this situation. So that's good. Color schemes. One thing I'm going to read real quick. The one thing Ron Johnson says here on this page that I showed you about color. One thing he says: color has power. Devote it to strong 4-color photojournalism. I think that's really, really important. I was taught, let the photos be the star of the show when they're color. You don't have to put colored headlines on stuff. And I mean, I get it on life pages sometimes, or very, very special packages. You can put color on headlines, and that often looks really good. But just your basic routine headlines, you don't need to put color on those. And you don't need to put big color screens on over stories. Sometimes that makes it harder to read. Yes, sometimes screens are nice for stories, but I would just limit what you're doing with color other than on your photos. And remember, if you make those photos big and dominant, 3, 4, 5 columns, then you got a lot of powerful color there. So I think that's good advice from Ron. So number 4, make your pages modular, design in rectangles. And I see, when I go through papers these days, I see more and more people doing that. And it makes your pages just a lot easier to navigate. When you don't have dog legs, when everything's modular in its own little self-contained unit, and what I mean by that, and every story and all of its elements are in a little rectangular box in their own self-contained unit, it's just easier to follow it, and it looks better, right? So here's the Plain Talk in Vermilion doing a good job with modular. Notice we have a dream show of mine, and then we have a giant photo, we have a big headline, we have a drop cap M, and we have a secondary photo. And how did they design it? All in one big rectangular, its own unit. Same way with City Council approves budget, its own little vertical unit. Grand champion with a photo, its own little square, and then local physician discusses whatever, and it's in its own little square. We don't have the grand champion story and photo sticking up into the dream show box, right? the dream show has its own little box. Everybody's got its own little box. And notice the order that this page has. And it's just a really good. We've got a big headline and another big bold headline and less bold at Grand Champion. This one's getting kind of bold down here, but they've got a bit of a headline hierarchy working here too. So good page here with the Vermilion Plain Talk. Great job, modular. Same here, Custer County Chronicle. I looked at this and went, holy cow, there's a lot of news going on here in Custer. There's a lot of good stories here, but same thing here. It's modular. You've got the centerpiece with the girls, 2 photos with the girls rock, and on it goes. Everything's in its own little rectangular box. There's nothing sticking into no other story. Good job. The only thing I would say here is, you know me, by now, in the last 30 minutes, I'd make these photos bigger. I would have made this drum photo 1 bigger, maybe had less of this wastewater story on the cover, maybe jumped it. But otherwise, there's a lot of good stuff going on that page. This just happens to be, this is a Mobridge opinion page. And again, everything in its own little rectangle, from the cartoon to the My View to Governor Noem's column, to the letters to the editor, to the editorial, everything in its own little unit. Nothing's creeping into anybody else's space. Here's what happens when you don't design modular. So the Flanders City story, it'd be great to have it in its own little 4-column box here, but we've got the hot dog day story popping up into its little world, if you will. I would avoid that. And no, this is not such a bad dog leg here. I think it's fairly easy for readers to follow, but the more you dog leg, the more chances you get to confuse people. Here's another one, paying a visit to county officials. It'd be great to have that in its own little box, but we've got the Flandreau Booster Club jamming up inside its little rectangular box. So I would avoid that. Here's Millbank. So with this Millbank students enjoy the prom. We come down the first column and we're confronted with another story here, Millbank Schools. So we've got to jump up to the second column and then up and around the Cinco de Mayo celebration. I would avoid that. I would make that Millbank prom story its own square. So whatever you got to do, you might take the Millbank school story and put it somewhere else, or there's a number of things I might do to this page. But the point being, be careful with those dog legs. This one is from a national paper that I found on museum.org. And you see this one, I think it's really, there's dog legs everywhere here. But notice this one, 2 North County towns handle business. You start the story, comes up here, and it's, I don't know. You could probably go from here to the second column up here and start reading. The problem is it's a whole different story. The Pickering Seeks 2 write-in candidates is a story unto itself that wraps into that third column. And you guys, that's going to be confusing, I think. And you might say, well, they'll figure it out at some point, and they probably would. But you've asked, you've made it harder for them to read your newspaper. You've basically invited them to go do something else because again, you're making them guess. So don't make them guess. Have your pages be modular. Again, there's a big difference between that and that.
It should be about over.
Yeah, okay.
Whenever it's over, you can do the.
Okay, number 5, use contrasting elements. Contrast, what we're doing is we're making 2 or more elements very different, right? Very much contrast creates visual interest, and it's a key to dynamic design, as it says there. And it can enhance organization and hierarchy. So what are we talking about? So you might use a big and a small headline, or a big and a small photo, or a big and a small copy block, right? Light face or bold type. A horizontal story at the top with a vertical story going down the side. Serif and sans serif type. We've talked about that a little bit. Sometimes if you get a great color photo and you've got like a historic black and white photo, that can be kind of a neat contrast. And then thick and thin lines and all these types of stuff. Sometimes a standard photo with a cutout, that gives some nice contrasting elements, and it makes the page more interesting. So that's what we're talking about. And this is an oldie but a goodie. I always show these next two slides, and it's a good example of one page that doesn't have much contrast and how it differs from a page that has a lot of contrast. So if you look at this Eagle Times, this is a page I got from the newseum.org. I mean, it's got a pretty big photo there. It's got modular, so they're doing a lot of things that are good on this page, but I'm not sure how you feel about this page, but it just kind of, for me, it just kind of sits there. You know, it doesn't invite me in. It's just, well, if you want to read me, I suppose you could. So there's why do I think that? I think because there's not much contrast on that page. Contrast it with this page from the Argus Leader from a few years ago. Holy cow, you have got some serious contrast going on. And I think it makes things more interesting. I would argue that the Argus Leader is way more interesting than that page. And so how do they do it? Well, they have a cutout of a cigarette butt, kind of in your face here. They've got bold all cap text here with some different types of text up here, color. They have a horizontal story, lead story about a Vera with a little breakout where Mary Carroll's column is vertical down the side. So we've got that dynamic going. We've got color on the centerpiece with a huge photo, right? With some like light tan or whatever and kind of a brownish. We've got all sorts of stuff with a big fat core of headline with then light face controversy. There's just a lot of stuff going on here that brings contrast to this page. And I just think that this page is much more visually interesting than this page. So that's what we're talking about, contrast, right? Here's the Messenger with some contrast. We saw this page a little earlier. We talked about the headlines. There's some contrast there. But here we have a semi cutout that's a little bit vertical with a very horizontal photo. And so that's nice contrast. And I just think overall, there's some nice things going on here. We have the 4th of July has kind of some clip art that works pretty well. We have a breakout of a little girl down here, or a cutout, I should say, attached to a photo. So the Minnehaha Messenger brings in some contrast to make this page more visually appealing. I think that's good. All right. Okay, we're getting down here. So I promised 5 and I lied because here's the bonus. I would look for any opportunity to use a breakout to help readers along. Readers like them. Why? Because they help readers and they also can add interest and contrast. And it doesn't have to be a tough thing, you can do, if your school district says, hey, we're going to build a new school, you can do a little breakout. Obviously you're going to write a story about that, but you can do a little breakout. What's in the school? What's going on with the new school? So you could say, how much is it going to cost? When's the start date for construction? When they're going to be done? What's going to be in there? How many classrooms? Is there going to be a gym? Is there going to be a theater? What, you just tell people all sorts of stuff about that. But there's so many places that you can use breakouts. And here's the Selby Record doing a nice little, essentially a schedule for their their July 3rd festivities, whatever you want to call it. No, they just break it out of the story and hey, everybody, number 1, meal times from 6 to 7:30, blah, blah, blah. We got the parade at 8 o'clock, blah, blah, blah. And what else? Blah, blah, blah. That's just really nice. They put it in a blue reverse text and that grabs people. That's a nice looking front page. If you ask me, doesn't have a big giant dominant image, but in a way, this photo is joined at the hip kind of with this breakout box is one big dominant. It's acting as one big dominant image. So very nice job, I think. And again, schedules are great for breakouts, right? Here is the T paper. And what do? Hey, congratulations to these Teacher of the Year nominees. And well, they just break the names out. And that's great. That's a good job there. So you're always looking for breakouts. Here is the Collegian from February. And Serena broke out the fact that, hey, we're gonna have to have all these different graduation ceremonies, and here's when certain colleges are going to graduate, right? So that's good. And then this is one more from the Collegian. We talk bios. You can do bio boxes. People love that stuff. So we talk about Maya Helland, and we have a bio of her. What's her name? When was she here? Position, height, all that kind of stuff. Her statistics. You know, if you get a new superintendent, you get a new CEO of maybe the biggest company in your town, you can break out, who is this person? Where did they come from? Where's their education? What's their work history? What's their family? You could put quotables in there. You can do all sorts of stuff with little breakouts. But notice how on all these pages, you gave readers a little bit of help by using breakouts. So we're getting down there. I just happened to pull this one out of a story that I saw on newseum.org a couple of days ago. Weather by the numbers. Boom. They just pulled this stuff right out of the story. Sometimes a breakout can literally be stuff that you call from the story, and it's in the story too. Sometimes it's added information. So it can be either one. So I always be thinking about that when you're reporting. You know, is there something I can do? You know, is the city council going to have a big controversial meeting? Tell them when it is, where it is, what are the two arguments, if that's appropriate, or whatever else you want to tell them, right? So last thing that I would tell you is, if you haven't looked at freedomforum.org and go up here to today's front pages, click on that. Every single day, you get all sorts of good ideas from papers around the country and actually around the world. So, so there you go. That's what I got. And now, questions.
Thank you, Jim. Let you catch your breath. Wow, that was really, really good.
Yeah, I kind of talk too fast, don't I?
No, that's awesome. Very good. Listen, in the time remaining, any questions or comments from anyone who want to shoot at Jim here quickly? I know he'd be willing to take stuff offline as well too, but if anyone has any questions, jump in here.
Nope. Let's see.
Jim, you overwhelmed him.
I see that, right? How do I feel? How do I feel about rules or lines between stories? I like them. I think they bring order to the page. So I don't make the lines very big, at the biggest, I would make my cutoff rules, which are the horizontal rules. I'd make them maybe 2 point. And then the column rules, I make them hairline, because I've seen newspapers that have their cutoff rules like 12 point, and they're huge, and there's no content there. It's just a line. It's kind of a road sign for readers. So you don't need to make those huge, because there's no content there. So just make them small, and they'll do their job small. But I do like 1 or 2 point cutoff rules with hairline column rules. And I think that helps bring order to the page. You saw it in that a paper that did it really well was the Plain Talk. If I don't know, Dave, are you going to be able to post this? I can send this to you, and people can go back and look at those examples. The Plain Talk in Vermilion does a really good job with column rules and cutoff rules.
Other questions, comments, anyone? Well, listen, we're running up against our time here. We promised to try to keep it 45 minutes or so, and we've done that. And I know we're coming up to lunch hour as well for many. First of all, I want to thank Jim for doing this great presentation. Thank you very much. And the recording of this will be made available will include Jim's PowerPoint as well. I'll get that from him, and so we can incorporate that as well, so you can go back to that. And with that, I want to say thank you for participating, and look for next month in August for another member meetup to come. We've got a fun, good topic planned that we'll be announcing shortly, and we'll get the information out about that. But we hope you can join in August. And again, look for in the coming months, at least once a month, where we can provide these forums, these opportunities to get together, and a lot of different topics and a lot of different opportunities to meet virtually. So appreciate and thank you for your participation today. And with that, say, stay cool out there, everyone. Be safe. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.